Harlan Coben is back with yet another Netflix adaptation of his mysteries. This time it's Stay Close, which marks at least the second Coben mystery to star Richard Armitage. Is this limited series worth the binge? Four people each conceal dark secrets from those closest to them, and as the past comes back to haunt them, threatening to ruin their lives and the lives of those around them, what will be their next move? This is a fairly convoluted mystery, but it does all flow together well and makes for a cohesive story. We follow Megan, a working mother of three who's about to get married, Ray, a once promising documentary photographer who captures some unexpected images with his lens, Broom, a detective unable to let go of a missing persons cold case, and Lorraine, an old friend of Megan's. I love how all these storylines intersect and intertwine. It becomes a bit like an if you give a mouse a cookie scenario, as one thing leads to the next, and typically that next thing is even more dramatic than what came before. This is a really good cast also. We've got Richard Armitage, as I had mentioned. He's playing Ray, the photographer. James Nesbitt playing D.S. Broom. Sarah Parrish as Lorraine. And then Cush Jumbo playing Megan. And just how cool is that name? I mean, Cush Jumbo? Rock on. The relationships throughout this winding mystery are what keeps it moving so tautly. Each is complicated in their own rights, but because of the ongoing case, things get even more complex. I really enjoyed the relationship between D.S. Broom and his partner Aaron. And they have history together, and their banter really comes across as two people who have known each other for quite some time. Now, the central mystery is the disappearance of a young man one night during the annual carnival. Now, he's not the most likable of guys, but he's missing all the same. So as the police investigate where he may have gone off to, D.S. Broom discovers that a cold case that he had worked on for years shares a bunch of similarities with his new missing person case. The limited series is 8 episodes at each around 45-ish minutes. And I think it flows rather well, but there were a few times where the story felt a bit repetitive as we get to see scenes over and over, even though these new ones did often lead to new discoveries. And the back and forth also does add some time to the story overall, and I think certain portions could have been shored up just a bit to use the time more efficiently. There's one story complication in this that appears, I think, about halfway through the show, and it adds a level of ridiculousness that I just wasn't prepared for. And at first, I actually hated it. Ken and Barbie, as they're described in the credits, come into the story and they're very mysterious. They felt out of place at first, but then they really grew on me and I ended up liking what they did for the story, even if I do think that they could be an unnecessary story arc. But just the absurdity of their presence is fun, and they certainly do add some drama. Now, I think you'll be able to figure out one of the main mysteries by about episode 4. I think some dialogue gives away too much of the climax, which then led me to figure out the perpetrator at that point. That doesn't mean I still didn't have a couple of doubts, because I really did, but each time I just couldn't shake the feeling that they had already revealed the perpetrator to us. As one of the storytelling devices, we get a lot of flashbacks, because portions of the storyline go back 17 years, and these are choppy and a bit convoluted, which is exactly as they're supposed to be. The memories are foggy and fragmented, and typically even out of context. As time goes along, these become more cohesive, and more portions begin to fall in line. The flashbacks typically add to the story in positive ways, which is great, because there are shows where flashbacks only serve to add time to the story, but don't actually push the narrative forward. Here, they work to build out the story and are shown judiciously. I enjoyed the cinematography in this because some locales are in wooded areas with these ruins strewn about. We get a sense of isolation, but also wonder and intrigue through these areas. There's also this wonderful use of aerial shots as we'll follow vehicles, or even used as establishing shots. There's one in particular that involves this massive head sculpture, and it's awesome to watch the shot come in from above to slowly just have that head appear, and then the camera pans down to show us the true size and scale of that sculpture, and then how it dwarfs our characters. As we get to the climax and reveal, there is an exposition dump that felt a bit clunky to me. Leading up to this point, though, I had loved it, especially at a point where a character learns something that is totally a shock to them. At the point of realization, the reaction is so wonderfully executed and powerful. But the actual reveal just felt like they didn't know any other way to wrap up the story and give us all of the details. I mean, it's not a bad way to end the show, but it wasn't the smoothest either. While this is mainly a dramatic mystery, there are some moments of action, and some were a bit gory, which I hadn't expected. And another felt a little ridiculous in its execution. I mean, it was fun to watch, but it felt more like it was staged and it was a show rather than something happening in life. And that broke me out of the show for this piece. I mean, I became aware that I was watching a production rather than just remaining in the world as an observer with everything happening around me. Now, I didn't notice the score or soundtrack too often in this, but there was one point where a version of Radiohead's Creep played, and I just never heard that before. It was a jazz rendition, and I've got to say, while it was odd, it wasn't bad. And the oddity then fits so well with the scene. Also, even though he was a supporting character, Eddie Izzard was phenomenal in this. I loved how he presented his character and was able to take someone who could be very unpleasant and make them into a compassionate and sympathetic character who I wanted to see more of. So overall, Stay Close is a thrilling mystery that contains a lot of twists and turns throughout. I think the story, while convoluted and complex, is still easy to follow, helped along greatly by some very complicated characters. I do think the story reveals too many clues about the perpetrator, though, too early in the series. But the ride is still fun, and there are still enough additional story complications to make you question if you've really figured it out. I believe the relationship aspect of the series is one of the high points, and I really enjoyed how dynamics helped to shape our character trajectories, leading to some demonstrable growth for many of the players. And while portions of the show are repetitive and there's a rather large exposition dump for the finale, the limited series overall is enjoyable and full of intrigue. There's no sex or nudity, but there is a lot of profanity and a bunch of gory violence. I give Stay Close 4 out of 5 couches. What other mystery writers' works would you like to see adapted for a series? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.